Hey guys, I'm Richard Fitzgerald. This is Dubai Works, where we interview the business leaders making a difference in this great city.
Eid Mubarak to everyone who's celebrating next week. Enjoy the break. I had a busy week. I'm sure you all did. I was down in Ras Al Khaimah. It's always inspiring to see the other Emirates with their big plans and initiatives, as well as our great city here in Dubai. Internationally, Saudi Arabia announced their vision, on top of their Vision 2030, their Expo 2030 bid in Paris. And it coincided with, there was an Irish delegation who I met on Monday, passing through Dubai to Osaka, where after Dubai Expo 2020, the next one is in Osaka in Japan in 2025. And they were on a trade mission to check that setup out. And it just reminded me of how things don't stop, and how another expo is going to be, hopefully if Saudi win the bid, is going to be in the region as well. So good luck to my home country, Ireland, in Osaka, and then to Saudi as they win their bid as well. It's been an active, busy week. This conversation is all about HR and the different topics that modern organizations need to be aware of right now. Enjoy the conversation. Back to another episode of Dubai Works Business Podcast. Today we are joined by Asmara Nomani. She is the CEO of ANC Global. They are a leading HR consultancy firm in Dubai, specializing in delivering innovative and strategic people management solutions to organizations across various industries. We're going to hear about ANC, we're going to hear about the industry, the marketplace, talk about STEM, talk about neurodiversity and plans for the future. So good morning, Asmara.
Good morning, Richard. Thank you so much for having me over.
And thanks for joining the show. So, can you tell us elaborate a little bit more on that intro? What is ANC Global?
Well, ANC Global is my brainchild, and it's my child as per se. It's a human resources, full-fledged consultancy organization, and we're targeting, different strategic clients to look at individuals who are really requiring change and need to go through cultural transformation. So it's a full-blown HR consultancy firm, if I may say. We are based in UAE, but it's a global, it's got a global footprint. So, we've got markets in Turkey, Central Asia, parts of Europe, and we're expanding in Africa also. So I'm super excited to talk a little bit more about ANC Global.
And the abbreviation is your initials and
Yes.
consultancy, but it doesn't have HR in it. But so is your background in HR?
Yes, I have been an HR professional for over 2.5 decades now. So I've literally seen and grown as an HR professional from the time when it was just about personnel and administration to full-blown HR organizations where we are focusing on leadership. And it's pretty much business partnering model, right? For a while. I've been associated with some of the most, let's say, profound organizations globally. I continue to work for one big name. And I've been around the HR fraternity for a very long time. I tried myself to be a better human resources professional as a strategic business partner also.
How did you get into it?
Very interesting. So my degree was in human resources, but I always had this love to interact. I'm a pretty chatty person. So, I'd like to talk to people, but I just decided that, this was a space that I want to know more. So I got into it in the late 90s. Which was, again, a time where, it was just about administration and personnel. But then, I always thought there's so much to the human brain that, can be looked into, because we're evolving and we're a different person in different stages of our life at large. So that's how I got into it, and then I loved it. I was trained in brands. I taught for a while also, but then I thought that the human side of it is what excites me.
You were trained on brands.
So I've been a marketer. So I got my degree. I got my first degree in marketing, but then I kind of moved into human resources as a degree as well. But my career started as a human resources professional.
Okay, great. And so the services that you offer, when was ANC set up?
It's a recent concept. Let's say we were about a year old, to be honest. But since I've been around the industry, I've always provided consultation, which was more pro bono to a lot of my networks. If you're stuck in a problem, what do we do? Because I've been into, I've literally sat on the other side of it. table. I continue to sit on the other side of the table, which means the corporate side. So if you're making business plans, what role does HR really play? And then how do we pivot? And when people are changing locations and people are, going around, how do you develop them as leaders, as better leaders? And how do you build a succession pipeline? So those things really excite me. I feel that there is so much scope. And so I decided that it's about time that, I just kind of step into it. I've got some brilliant consultants who work with us. I've got a fantastic team, and it's going well.
And when you sort of wanted, when you were obviously passionate about the HR role that can play in business and all the things that stem from that, what were the options available to you to set up a business? Do people outsource their HR? Was it automatically going to be a consultancy? Could you be, we see a lot of training type, coaching type companies as well. So what were the options available to you, and how did you end up with the structure of what you decided on?
I mean, great question, because a lot of people, even to date, actually confuse HR consultancy or an organization that offers full-blown HR, services or solutions as a recruitment organization, especially in our part of the world over here. They're still evolving. And when you talk about the big names, or when you only talk about, if you're going through a change or if you're going through a right sizing or a restructure of big or medium-sized organizations, we're just going to have the big names. When I started, well, this was something that was brewing up. So I've been working for a very long time. And for at least the last decade or so, I thought, I'd really want to have an organization that really listens to the clients and not sort of be a little myopic that here's a program, this is what we feel you need to do. I think it's extremely important to understand the values of the organization, where the business is headed, what are the right solutions that are needed for that business. And I think that's where, I decided that my focus will, of course, continue to be providing, of course, all full-fledged, because it's an entity. So we've got to do what is right for the business. So we should be in a position, but it's extremely customized program. So if you and I are having a dialogue, you will know what you want to do, but what are some of the options that will take you to, your end goal is where, we kind of come in, and we do have a lot of back and forth and a lot of dialogue, because in a normal corporate world, Richard, the world is not, it's not the same. So people come in, some executives leave, they leave that agenda with them, but the group that you're working with is pretty much there, right? So it's very important to have that constant dialogue and keep that focus with the leadership of a particular client. And more so, as I said, because I've always been on the other side of the table, I felt that, and I've worked with some great solution partners, but I always feel that how my team is going to execute it practically on ground is perhaps a little missing link, because you get solutions, but the execution usually is happening by the team that is doing it. And you really need to make sure that, they understand the value of that. And there are practical solutions also. So if there is a change that's happening, what are the phases of those changes, and how are we going to pivot it, and when do we get back, and how do we assess that that change has been well executed?
When you were sort of business planning and looking at the services, I think sometimes a year in, and you can tell me if this is the same for you, but sometimes we might have most of our clients in one area, but and you can share that. But I think general question is like, where did you expect the services to be and in the future in terms of consultancy? Is that advising companies of different sizes that you need a people and culture department, that you need a head of HR, that you need not just recruitment, that you need these types of software, versus you actually need us as a long-term partner to manage some of these things because you mightn't have the budget to have these in-house or something like that.
Absolutely.
So where was the sort of plan, and kind of where are you now?
As I said, the plan pretty much is about the practical aspects of having a solution partner sit on the table.
Yeah.
And what I really want my clients to also understand, and that's what we work with our clients as well, is that we are your right hand. So we're with you in the journey as well. From an overall programming standpoint, I would say one of the biggest focus that I will see and I continue to see, and I have lived through those, are areas around succession and talent and leadership growth. And with so much of world changing, how do leaders pivot in themselves as well? And leader at the end of the day is a human being, right? So, there will be a lot of changes in their personal life. So hence the programs that are developed are extremely sort of known to that particular group of individuals. So if I know who you are better, of course, we have NDAs and we do confidentiality agreements, I will be able to better coach you and guide you or recommend certain solutions. Technology plays a huge part in it. I mean, no programs can be without technology, I think, today, or rather for the last decade plus now. But I also feel that while I was programming, I said I would definitely just don't want to tick box different solutions. I want to create a space that is a solution according to the client needs, and it's not one size fits all. And secondly, there's a lot of change management that needs to happen within the organization from the start of running a program to the end of running a program. Training or workshop is just one part of the overall programs that we offer. So yes, there are a lot of workshops and team building exercises, and it's all fun and nice. But at the end of the day, the tough conversations happen in boardrooms, or happen in offices, or happen in town halls, or those discussions actually happen. So I think there's a big focus. For me, DE&I, as a woman leader, it's a woman-owned business. I have advocated for diversity, equity, and inclusion, not only women rights, and not only including women into the workforce or to boardrooms, but overall DE&I. And there is a big passion point that I have, and we can talk about that, when you feel like.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
So how does that sort of come into it? I'm trying to sort of understand what a proposal would look like.
Sure.
So do you work with SMEs or startups or blue chip kind of global companies? And if they sort of, I know obviously it's bespoke, but just say, for example, a company of 50 people who doesn't necessarily have a dedicated HR strategy. Sure. They sort of do recruitment through a recruiter or on LinkedIn, and they have an onboarding system, but they don't, and they have maybe appraisals once a year or whatever, but they don't have any sort of anything else. So, and they come to you and go, hey, we need a bit of help. What would that look like?
So generally what it looks like is, where is the organization headed? So what's your long-term plan like? So is there an expansion? Is the team growing? I mean, there are tons of assessment questions, and we've got tools to assess that as well, aside from just a conversation and a dialogue. So those are scientific tools that assesses the needs of the organization. And when, for instance, a small business would actually come to us and say, we have these expansion plans, and there are certain things. So I think the biggest thing is the sustainability of your current team, and what do you see going forward? So if you've got a marketer, or if you've got a brand executive today who's very passionate about it, can he or she actually be your next director for marketing, for multi-market operation? And if the answer is yes, how are we going to help him or her get to where that person is? So have a full strategy in place. So within HR, of course, there are different verticals or different subgroups of HR, and those are huge in themselves. So talent management in itself is a huge field. Leadership development is a huge field. Change, culture, engagement, performance systems. A lot of times performance systems are just put in as a tool and nothing happens. What we've also tried to do, Richard, is that we have a mechanism to kind of get feedback anonymously from our clients. So once we're delivering programs and we're talking to employees or even the HR partners, and we're generally talking to, the bigger, larger group of employees, we actually tell them, here we have the speak up line for you. We're not charging anything. We just want to know how the program is going. So come on anonymously, have a conversation, a chat, drop in a message. And sometimes we're getting fantastic responses from normal employees from different organizations. They don't name it and just say, okay, this was a program that you guys sort of executed. There was an assessment. I had an individual development plan. But, it seems like, the management has lost its focus because they've just gone to another direction. So to your question, if there is a business that comes to us, we try to offer them a program which is based on their business requirement from a long-term strategy point of view. And within the subgroups, we tell them, okay, this is the strategy, what it's going to look like from an operations standpoint, from an assessment, handling tools, making sure that there is technology, and the technology gets to be upgraded as well constantly. So
yeah, and very clear. Thank you. And where would DEI come in that scenario?
I think D&I is we're all different. Firstly, and I always give this example. I've got twin nephews, and they're identical twins, and I always give this example, and they're like literally. You can barely figure out who's who.
Even personalities are similar.
Personalities to an extent were similar, and while they were growing up, but both of them are so different individuals. Like somebody which it's just mind-boggling. So from just a biological standpoint, I actually say even if we're coming from the same womb at the same time, we're so different. And D&I it's actually not. It's not something good to have. It's something that has to sit at the start of an HR strategy. That anything that you're providing, whether it's a talent management program or a leadership development or whatever, it has to come from the whole concept that individuals are different, they're diverse. We need to be equitable. So there was a time, Richard, when there was about equality and this, that, and the other. And I was a bit of it doesn't go well with me when it says equal. I'm like, okay, why is anybody telling us that we're equal? Like we're all equal, but it's just about equitable. And this is definitely about 15 years ago, that if you got to create those situations and scenarios where if somebody needs extra time or needs an extra space or just walks out of a meeting because, it's a lot of information overload, it's okay, I think it's just important to understand. And that inclusivity part doesn't come easy in organizations, because while there's been a lot of conversations, it's tough to, talk to somebody who's different. You and I are different people, and we're looking at the world in a different way. But there are certain values that the organization wants us to be on, and then there are certain business objectives. And we've got to figure out how we're going to get those business objectives with our differences at the same time.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. I'm not wrong. We're looking at it from a different lens. And I think as an HR solution partner, it's very important for us to make our clients recognize what value you and I will bring onto that project with our differences.
Yeah.
Right?
Asmara, do you get specific DEI briefs? If an organization said, hey, I'm aware that, maybe we're very good at some sort of things, but we just don't have a view on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can you consult us with that? And how would that look like?
Well, usually when we get a brief around DE&I, we get two kinds of, let's say, clients. One that is very, very new to the concept. So if it's either a startup or a mid-sized organization which was just focusing on their production and making sure that, the product is out there and it's being sold, etc. So the HR is pretty much, we hire people and we pay them well and we let them go if they want to go. And, then we move on to another group of people. And then there are organizations which already have a DE&I strategy, and either it's not working or they want it to get to the next level. So what's working today will not work for the next 5 years. So if I look at client A, it's pretty much an open or a plain chit, let's say. So it's good to know, to tell them what's best that you can do. But the first thing is creating awareness around DE&I. What does it actually mean? And as I said, it means more than including women. I actually say that I think after a couple of years, we will not be talking about women. I mean, yes, we'll be talking about a lot of other DE&I concepts, but we'll actually be talking about how we're going to include both men and women, right? So the ratio is definitely increasing. There are fantastic women out there. So when we are looking at these small businesses, we tell them, okay, here's a whole process and here's a whole model, and it's not going to happen overnight. I think that's also very important. A lot of times clients just want quick wins. We'll do an event, we'll do a gender sensitization session. Okay, that's fine, of course. So that's how we try to guide them and tell them that, let's have some quick wins. And there are always low-hanging fruits in businesses. So let's capitalize on those, whatever, your strategy entails. And then with organizations who already have a DE&I program, we actually do an entire assessment to understand where do they land. So a lot of times, global organizations feel that the program is fantastic, but when you hear the employees talk about it, they're like, no, it's not working. Like we hear a lot of fancy stuff and a lot of presentations, but when it comes to raising your voice around a harasser, for example, people never take it up. They're like, oh, it's okay. It wasn't, you were just being sensitive and stuff. So these are very sensitive conversations. So when we talk to mature organizations which already have a DE&I, we actually do tell them what are the areas that you need to focus on. If you've been focusing on one aspect of DE&I think it's about time that you step into another aspect, get in specially abled individuals into the workforce. Just look at your women leaders for that matter. And it's very interesting, a lot of times you get women leaders in specific roles or specific functions for that matter. And there are certain functions where you don't see them. For example, sales. How do you run a business where, you don't have a sales leader and you only have a certain way of sales leaders? So I think that is superbly important to understand what the need is of the client and give them solutions which make sense to them as well.
Fair enough. Interesting. So just technically, we often sort of like to explore how people go about setting up the businesses. So you still work with a global company in the evenings, you mentioned, and but you set this up as a business. So how did you go about that? Are there specific free zones in Dubai and license activities that are geared towards consultants, or were you more on the sort of recruitment HR side, and which did you pick?
We of course picked up consultancy, and when you look at the overall space of consultancy, you have big global organizations also, you've got mid-tier organizations as well, and you have individual consultants. So from a legal standpoint, I think we've got readily available information. It's pretty simple to set up businesses over here. It's just making sure that you are targeting the right, sort of clients and also where you are set up. For us, this is our headquarter. So we're based in UAE, but our expansion plans are all throughout GCC. So I have had the privilege of working for multi-markets and I've really enjoyed it. And I don't want to just stick to one market. So I think setting up a business is probably one of the easiest things to do. It's actually running the business and running the show is the tough part.
Which license did you get?
So we had a Midland, license, of course,
mainland
license, one,
license,
sorry. And the mainland license really did help us in understanding, how we want the overall picture of our company also to look like. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. So then on the consultancy side, there's a lot of obviously, companies who work with consultants. Is there sort of an RFP process? So for example, how do the big four go about pitching for business? And do they have separate departments like the big consultancy firms like, Booz Hamilton or BCG or Accenture? Do they have departments that specialize in this area, in HR and things like that? And are they getting briefs like, hey, we have 1,000 people in our company, but we don't have a people and culture department. How should we set one up? Is that how business works?
So let me try to get the question correctly. So you're saying within a client group, are there any like business setups for like a procurement setup, or is that the question?
So say a multinational company works with a consultancy firm, like one of the big consultancy firms, and sometimes they'll say, okay, I want to give you a brief on digital transformation, or I want to give you a brief on market entry, or I want to give you a brief on cost benefit analysis or something like that. Do people go out and go, hey, for example, I heard an interview this week where there was a large property firm, and they said that they recognized, over decades that internally the culture wasn't perfect, and they did a complete revamp. And I'm wondering, okay, did they do a research piece? Did they employ a consultant to do surveys? And then if so, then is that something that there's an RFP portal for? How do you pitch for this business? Could you potentially compete with the existing consultancy firms for that work?
Well, again, that's more of a competitor landscape, let's say, question. And I'm, of course, happy to answer that. The way it works is that whenever an organization is going through a transformation, there is a lot of discussion that happens that, okay, what does transformation really look like, right? And then again, there are big consultants which are there, and that's the first go-to sort of place that, okay, these big consultants are here, let's figure it out. A lot of times, from a budget standpoint, most organizations would say, okay, we'll get a brief, we'll give them a brief, we'll get the information, and then we'll go out there trying to execute what they've told us to do. How we compete, of course, is that, of course, we have a network. And one of the things that, Richard, I was very cognizant of while setting up this business is that I don't want to run around looking for clients and I really want to work with people who understand that there has to be a value, and it should not just be one lovely report coming in from as a consultant. As I mentioned earlier, my team tries to work with people on a day-to-day basis, like literally as like we're part of your team. So we're sitting somewhere else, but we're literally doing that work for you. So yes, there is a proper RFP and an RFA process in organizations. It's always interesting to know what the scope is like, and it's an entire process. So when you're going out to any organization, they will have a proper process in place, and that's the same as applicable to big consultancies as well. And then they do partner with mid-sized consultancy organizations through their own RFP and RFA processes.
Yeah, no, the reason I ask is because I'm just wondering, because what we often see sort of head of HR roles available and career professionals like the positions that you've held before are currently as well. And, sometimes the responsibility of putting that process in place within an organization is sort of done by recruitment. But, so you hire a head of HR, people in culture, and you ask this person, okay, what's your roadmap for our business? And they sort of implement it. And in that case, then they don't necessarily, they're providing the internal consultancy. So I'm just wondering, knowing the sort of Dubai market, and how long have you been in the Dubai market?
I've been around this region since 2005, to be precise.
So you know very well.
It's been a while, but then I was in regional roles. So for some time I was back in my home country. I was in Turkey. So I've been going around.
Exposed to many more.
Definitely since 2018 to be precise now.
So you have a good grasp of, what people do in the market. Are people doing these things internally, or are they now going to, is there a need for companies like yours? Is there more of a demand? Is it increasing, or, is the market size increasing for the services, or is it more that it's more competitive, I guess?
If you take a step back just to understand, firstly, I'll take it in two parts. The first part is the need for having a solution partner. I worked with organizations who got huge headcounts within the HR space as well. But a lot of times those transitions or those changes or those strategic alignments they actually come from the head of HR with, of course, complete consultation from the CEO or the GM or the VP or whoever is leading that particular business. And then the head of HR with his or her team will understand that, okay, how do we kind of break it down and make sure that the solutions that we're getting are there now. They look at the current capabilities that they have. We've got to also understand that within HR teams, they've got a day job as well. And operations, day job is super tough, because there's something or the other happening with somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's where, I think the HR team does decide, and generally they do. And that's what our clients also say, that, okay, we've got this big project coming in. This is our current team. This is my capability and capacity. I want us to know how are we going to phase-wise execute this, and how is my team, to my last comment, how is my team going to be practically able to execute this? Because they've got a day job, they're coming from different backgrounds. Would you be able to counsel them and coach them as well? Because I think one piece that's very important, and then I've always advocated, is HR's functional capability building as well. As HR people, that's, you're just constantly doing it for the rest of the organization. But what about yourself? So we try to coach and counsel the HR team as well. So I think that part is definitely important. From an overall industry standpoint, I mean, of course, we do understand post-COVID, things are not looking really nice and, and fancy, but things are picking up. So there was a definite drop in this consultancy, let's say HR consultancy, about 3% or something. But there is a definite, and that's the optimistic part of it, that there is about a 9% increase that we're seeing from an overall growth in this industry till between, now till 2027. Depending on how, investment is coming in, and depending, I mean, we just talk about the UAE government, how they're kind of planning out their economic policies and stuff.
Not 9% for specifically HR
consultancies, yeah.
So that's less than inflation. That's 2% a year.
Absolutely.
So it's not a huge area.
I mean, of course, Richard, I think one of the things that you will continue to see in businesses, because it really depends. So if you just talk about, I can just talk about myself, that, okay, where am I putting my money, right? And as I said, I've been around the industry. This is more like, that's the reason I use the word, this is like my brainchild. This is like a child. This is something that I want to do and I enjoy doing. So if you just talk about numbers, you'll see the growth. And I actually feel that 9% is pretty pessimistic. This is bound to grow because, see, I think what we need to also understand is that when we were just from a previous question, HR teams are also shrinking, right? So there are a lot of HR people are either moving to other functions, which is fantastic. And generally, most organizations are reducing headcounts as well. And we see that. I mean, this is not confidential news. So it's important for somebody who's offering everything as one consultancy partner to step in with the HR director and say, okay, here are the things that, we can do.
That's the opportunity.
And we can partner with other firms as well, small consultants who can just probably work on a short-term assignment with us for this project, and we can bring that up. So I think the whole concept of that structure is also breaking up in organizations when it comes to providing HR services.
Roughly, so say if there's 100 companies, how many do you think, say they're sort of relatively SME on average, some startups, some bigger companies, how many would you reckon have any type of internal HR, even HR software that they pay extra for, or a department that's dedicated? How many outsource everything, and then how many so how many don't do anything, how many outsource everything, and how many have some sort of internal or full internal system?
I mean, I can answer this question with my experience, of course, not with data, but I would say that if there are 100 companies, all 100 companies will have some form of HR always, right? It really depends. Because operational HR is always needed. If you've got 4 people, you got to pay them, right? And you got to take care of their leaves, and you got to take care of their mental health and everything. So all organizations, big or small, will always have an HR function. It really depends on, again, I come down to the point, what the business strategy is like. And that's why I said when I evolved as an HR person, it was pretty much like run the payroll, make sure people have enough chairs, do this, do that. It was pretty much like, help us out kind of thing. To a time where today HR actually sits in conversations where say, okay, you have an expansion plan. Here are some of the things that we need to keep in mind with our current headcount. Here are a few people that we think can actually move to this particular market. There is a retention risk of these individuals. And, when HR has a voice on the table, and this is still work in progress, I would say. I don't want to sugarcoat things, right? It's still work in progress. But when you also have a solution partner, you can actually, because you can give a very neutral view as well. Because when you're sitting with the team, you get a little diluted. Oh, I think that this is not what it meant. No, but this is the conversation, and this is exactly what he or she meant when, they're saying this. So I think that when within a team of about 100 people, I would say all firstly will have an HR function. How many would outsource certain HR solutions? Even in the current recessionary situation, I would say about 20-25 of those 100 people will in some shape or form. Recruitment only, especially in our market, I would say about 80.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. No, and that's what I sort of was to get your perspective of what is the market size and what's there at the moment. A friend of mine, someone I trust, I asked them about, they work in a global entertainment company, and I asked them what's the function of HR, and they said, it was interesting, Asmara, how you described of, payroll and things like that. And they said they're client service for our employees. They're literally service people. So there's no training, there's no actual other function other than paperwork, document signing and things like that. And that to me was a little bit, shocking because, and it's part of one of those companies who's letting go people, and it's sort of, you can just see why performance might be low if work isn't being done on retention, if people are worried if they're going to get let go, and all they see is that internal HR function is to give them pay slips or whatever.
Absolutely. And whoever your friend is, I think he or she, is spot on, because here's the thing. A lot of times, because within HR space, there is an entire employee service model, which is there where you're providing technology and tools and, whatever. And generally in big organizations, we call it shared services model, where all the transactional HR is happening. But with even having such models in place, the HR, especially the operation HR, will constantly be involved in employee transactions. But I always, with my teams also, within the HR, and of course, if I'm an HR professional, I get to work with a lot of HR professionals, and God bless them. A lot of times they would actually be like, okay, this is happening in technology. Why do I have to have these conversations and stuff? I think what's very important is to give the value of HR as well, and just not only we're providing services. I kind of feel a little let down when I hear comments such as, there are support groups, because HR must not be a support group. There are tools and technologies that can support the life of an employee in today's era. We're talking about, AI and, stuff like that. And we've been talking about it since a while.
Support as in sort of admin, not necessarily.
Exactly. And I think a lot of, we've been advocating this concept that every manager needs to be an HR manager. What else are you really looking at? The KPIs, you get paid for it, but you've got a team, and the team is not motivated. You're constantly losing people. There are, ethics issues. There are speak up harassment issues. What are you really doing? Nobody is being developed. So yes, the HR is a facilitator. It's constant reminder, and there's an accountability that HR must bring in onto the table, but you're not really serving people. And I think that is something that we need to really work on and train managers. I think that's very important. But then have those systems and processes put up in place as well, where employees can do their own work, but then HR partners with them. So I think I always say there needs to be a repositioning in the field of HR. It's about time. It's about time that we work on that too.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So in another market, my sister works with a large transport government company, and they have 40,000 employees, and the HR department is really, really big.
Sure.
And her function alone, I don't know if these are latest numbers, but her team alone is 9 or 10, and they're occupational psychologists. And, because of it's an organization that size and it's semi-state or state, people are in that job for life or for 30, 40 years, the average 10. And so people's needs and requirements doing transport work is it's different type of performance, isn't it? And it's different type of needs and things like that. So, what's your sort of view on that in terms of, the bigger companies get, do they need to have that type of occupational psychologist and things like that in their company?
I've had the privilege to work for one of the biggest productions and operations in the beverage industry. And the stories that we would hear from our sites or our plants were mind-boggling at times. And I think when you're working in a high-stress environment, it is, I mean, I'll just give you an example. Just a forklift. Driving a forklift is like, oh, this happens every day. But can you imagine the amount of health and safety requirements that are needed to just drive that forklift where you're lifting things and you're moving around in a warehouse, there are people walking. So yes, I mean, you've got to keep, you can't lose it. It's not a table job, right? I would feel, and I always say this thing, and while I was trying to work on myself and develop and put like training programs and leadership programs for my team, I've always said you need to know the human mind more. You need to know the human behavior more. And I am superbly happy that the organization where your sister's working, there are occupational psychologists there. I think it's an imperative need for especially big production organizations.
And where do you think this so one of the things is when you're running a small business and a startup, you have to be conscious of costs and things like that. And there's budgets that you can allocate towards HR, internal for headcount or external for equipment, for consultancy. But on top of those budgets, there's also opportunity costs. Yes. For example, if you say, okay, I want to do training, okay, that's going to cost me X.
Yeah.
But the other cost that it's going to have on me is the X hours that those individuals aren't working. And when companies sort of come to you and they go, I know I need to do better HR. I'm willing to pay for it, but I understand opportunity costs and I don't necessarily want to not necessarily harm my business in the short term, but you get where I'm coming from. It's a tough decision sometimes to weigh it up.
It is. And see, that's why I say that the person who's sitting at the top, not the HR person, but this person who's driving the business is the one who needs to understand the values. So what if you don't train those people and they continue to live with you and they're actually ruining the business. So that's a bigger cost. I think it's superbly important to understand and have a good blend. And hence, when it's specifically to your question, it's about training and development. Hence, a blended learning approach is important. Everything cannot happen in classroom, must not happen in classroom. So there's so many tools, technology. So you've got the traditional 70-20-10 rule, and you continue to apply that. But I think the biggest thing is to not do anything for your people from developing them.
So 70-20-10 in reference to?
So 70-20-10 is like is a general rule that 70% of the times that you're training your employees, that's happening on the job.
Yeah.
So while everybody's working on a day-to-day basis, and then 20% is more to do with your technology, coaching, etc., and 10% is only in classroom.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
So that's an ideal model. Okay. We can retweak it based on what the HR journey or what the business journey is like. But generally, this rule works.
And that should be ongoing.
It should be ongoing. It should not be like once a month or 2 trainings per year, and here's a training calendar.
Yeah.
And it should also be a very individual-led work. I always give this example of my mom, and she would say, when we were children, we were 4, and she's very disciplined to date. So she'd make us all study and stuff. And we were pretty good students because, she was a strict one. And she'd say, well, I can make you come here and teach, but whatever you need to learn is something that has to come from within you. So I always put that onus on employees as well. So while HR and business should be able to provide those facilitation, take the person there, learning is really, on an individual.
Yeah.
You've got to have that appetite to learn and grow.
That's true. Yeah, totally agree. A question, we're coming to the end, but 2 more questions. One about mental health. Asmara, like, what's your view on in terms of, there are medical professionals who are trained and there's different sorts of ways of dealing with mental health issues. And if an employer isn't equipped with that training and that expertise and that certificate, how can they effectively sort of deal with that? And sort of where, is there a line or is it blurred?
While there is always a lot of discussion, and especially in COVID times, a lot of organizations started talking about mental health and mental well-being. And, I know in our community, it was like, oh, it's getting a bit of a cliche. And I said, well, it's at least it started happening.
Yeah.
Employee well-being and stuff. I think when you talk about mental health, firstly, it's a very technical aspect also. And I think technical aspects must be handled by technical professionals and not anybody who just feels that, oh, this person is just pulling it up or doing this. I would say that firstly, there has to be a complete field and get in more people who are mental health professionals. Even if you want to run twice a program, get the program from them and kind of make sure that it's being executed. Case in point, you want to outsource. A lot of times, a lot of people don't want to talk about mental health, right, in the workplace because it becomes like a cliche. Or this person has got, is on depression I've actually faced this question, like a manager coming into me and says, this person, is so down and whatever, and he's taking antidepressants and stuff. And I was like, well, firstly, he's told this thing to you in confidentiality. You're not supposed to talk about this. And secondly, it's medication. And thirdly, what have you done to help him? And what have we done to support? So I think that firstly, again, it leads from awareness. It can be a taboo. But just from mental health standpoint, I would say the employee well-being programs should be a priority. People should firstly talk about it. And I think leaders need to be vulnerable. That's very important. Vulnerability actually just brings in that trust in employees as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
amazing. Cool. So finally, I said two more questions, but let's merge this into one.
Sure.
But so ANC Global, your plans for the year, and on top of that, the economies of the region are quite boisterous. You know the region well, the GCC particularly. What's your outlook? Are you happy to be setting up a business and running a business in this part of the world?
Before answering that question, there was one piece that I really wanted to talk about, and I want to take that opportunity.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead,
Richard. So within the DE&I space, there is a big untapped market, which is on neurodiversity. And I've advocated that for the last 15 years. I've been a proud caregiver myself, and I went back to school and I learned. Now, what is neurodiversity essentially is that, just from statistics standpoint, 15 to 20% of the world population falls in some form of neurodiversity or the other. And when we say neurodiversity, we're talking about ADHD and dyslexia and autism, etc. So I have I've said that, somewhere just a couple of years back, people are talking about, do we want women into the workforce? I think it's about time that, we start talking about it. So at ANC, and that's my passion point, there is a big vertical or a big, let's say, area that we focus on, because we do understand that, and this is research, that people, like teams that have neurodiverse individuals, 30% of the time, they actually perform better than neurotypical teams. And within the special needs, let's say, population, about 40% of neurodiverse people are unemployed. And it's a huge population when, you talk about 40% people on that spectrum. So I have been advocating this at ANC. We partner with a lot of our clients to include neurodiversity in their overall DE&I strategy. And that is one of the things that I am really advocating in this part of the world and others as well, because I feel that this is an untapped market. When you talk about neurodiverse individuals, they are fantastic when it comes to, programming, when it comes to pattern recognition, when it comes to mathematics and stuff, because that's their focus. It's just how you include them, how you make sure that people understand what their needs are, and provide opportunities. So that's an area that I continue to focus on, and
Brilliant.
just by virtue of being here at the show, I want to really talk about this, and I really want
Glad you brought it up. Yeah,
thank you. And to the plans. As I said, this is a brainchild. This is something that I'm driving from my passion point. From pure business standpoint, I think some of the markets that are really, really picking up, we have Saudi Arabia. I've been working with a lot of Saudi clients off lately. I'm very happy because, I belong from this area. And there was a time when, as a woman, leader, professional, whatever you want to call it, was actually difficult to go out there and talk to people around, DE&I or bringing women into the workforce. And it is a huge potential. So that's one of the markets. And we're looking at other GCC markets also. We've got clients there. Then again, we have expansion plans in Central Asia and Turkey. It's almost there. I've lived in Turkey. It's a beautiful place. Istanbul happens to be like a second home for me. So those plans are there. We want to work with selected clients. We want to work with people who, as I said, recognize the importance of having a consultant partner sit with us from a long-term standpoint, rather than just workshops and trainings. And I'm not saying we're not doing it, because those are also important to make sure that employees are getting engaged and, there's an element of teamwork. We're constantly providing that. So those are ANC plans, and, work happens. I'm a working mother. So, that is something that I've enjoyed. I've got grown-up kids, but, kids always take good amount of time. And it's going well. And I'm super optimistic about the future of work in general.
Yeah, and this region, I'm sure. Asmara, thank you so much for sharing. These are some topics that we haven't addressed in that length and the detail before, and it's great to have someone experienced to talk us through them. Thanks for your time today, and we'll follow ANC Global's progress in the future.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you. Thanks for having me over.
Thank you to Asmara for sharing her story and her experience in the industry. I'm really glad that she brought up neurodiversity at the end. It gives employers something to think about, certainly me, and I hope it does for others as well. Thank you, as always, to the people behind the scenes. This week, Ali Baba was producing the show, along with Shahira Kindi, who put the cast together and will work with the team on Love in Dubai and Smashy TV under distribution. It is available as a streaming service on Smashy TV on the browser, mobile apps and smart TVs to watch the video in full, or any of the 220 so episodes that we've already done since January 2019. Dubai Works gets about 1,000 or 1,200 listens per episode. It's up towards 17,000 listens a month. It puts it in the top 10% in the region as podcasts, even though it's in the business category, which normally would be number 6 on trending topics. So thank you all for the consistency, for those who follow every week. And, as I said, we'll be back next week with another episode, and every week all summer. So do tune in. Thank you.